Army, Georgia State, 12 p.m. East on Saturday, September 4th, 2021. The Georgia State Panthers are -3, totals 51.5. And if you like the Army Black Knights in an upset on the road here, they're plus $1.25 for some money line cash. And once again, guys, real quick, following this past Sunday's sports wagering action, we're once again 10-2 in our last 12 Major League Baseball tier package picks on my BrockPage.com website. And if you want to see which one of these free YouTube picks I'm actually betting on personally, there's only one way to do that, and that's to sign up for a membership on my BrockPage.com website. We're also 3-0 in our last 3 extra daily picks on that very same page. And if you want to access today's extra daily pick, it's only going to cost you just $2.99. Now, we currently have over 850 members who are signed up and active on that site. And once again, if you want to see which one of these free YouTube picks that I'm actually betting on personally, a link for that site is in the description section below. That's BrockPage.com. Now, despite a really nice second half to the season for Georgia State last year, their defense allowed over 30 points per contest in their final 9 ball games. They're taking on an Army squad who won 7 out of their final 9 contests themselves, and they held their opponents to only 16 points a game during that stretch. Eric Smith had 78 total tackles along with 3.5 sacks. Meanwhile, Cedric Cunningham had 70 total tackles himself, along with a pair of sacks as well. Now, the Army Black Knights successfully covered the point spread in their final 3 games of 2020. When it comes to the scoring in this one, 2 out of Army's final 3 ball games did stay under the line. Meanwhile, Georgia State saw 3 out of their last 6 contests stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Army Black Knights +3 and the under 51.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Stanford versus Kansas State. And that's going to be a 12 p.m. Eastern kickoff at Jerry World in Arlington. The K-State Wildcats are -2.5, totals 53. Now, in my opinion here, guys, Kansas State has some serious quarterback issues. And once again, that's my personal opinion. Skylar Thompson is coming off a season-ending injury, and his replacement, Will Howard, he completed only 53% of his passes last year. Now, Kansas State proceeded to lose their final 5 ball games of the 2020 campaign, and their defense allowed 41 points per contest during that stretch of misery. Now, they're taking on a Stanford club who actually finished quite the opposite. The Cardinal, they won their final 4 ball games of 2020, and they successfully covered the number in their final 3 straight. Austin Jones rushed for 550 yards in just 6 ball games, and he scored 9 times on the ground during that span. Meanwhile, defensively, linebacker Levani Damuni led the club in tackles. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the underdog Stanford Cardinal +2.5 and the under 53. Next ball game, it is going to be I always say UL Monroe. I think it's just Louisiana now, right? Or is that the Raging Cajuns? I don't know. UL Monroe. UL Monroe versus Kentucky. 12 p.m. Eastern kickoff. The Kentucky Wildcats are -29.5, totals 55. The Wildcats should cover in this ball game, but I don't think they can score in the 60s. So I'm going to lean toward the Kentucky Wildcats -29.5 and the under 55. Next game, a lot of eyes on this one. Penn State versus Wisconsin, 12 p.m. Eastern start time. The Wisconsin Badgers are -5, totals 50. Now, the Badgers ended 2020 on a 2-game winning streak, and they're led by a really tough defense. Wisconsin did not give up over 28 points in a ball game once last year. And Jack Sanborn, he led the unit with 52 tackles along with an interception and a forced fumble. The Badgers garnered marquee victories over the likes of Minnesota and Michigan last year. They're taking on a Nittany Lion team who started last season losing their first 5 ball games, and that includes losses to Indiana, Maryland, and Nebraska. This Nittany Lion defense allowed 28 points a game for the year. Meanwhile, offensively, their leading rusher gained just 48 yards a game on average. Now, quarterback Sean Clifford, He completed just 60% of his passes last year and got sacked 22 times. When it comes to the total in this one, I'm just not sure the Nittany Lions can do enough offensively to help put this one over. New offensive coordinator, not a whole lot of talent on offense except for Dotson. The Lions also saw 5 out of their final 8 contests of the 2020 season stay under the line. Meanwhile, the Badgers went 4-1 at the under in their final 5 contests of 2020 themselves. I like the Wisconsin Badgers -5 in the under 50 points. Next matchup, it is going to be Oklahoma versus Tulane. 12 p.m. Eastern start. The Oklahoma Sooners are -26.5, total 69. Spencer Rattler threw for over 3,000 yards last season, 28 touchdown passes, and he also ran it in 6 times as well. His favorite target, Marvin Mims, averaged 16.5 yards per catch, along with 9 touchdown grabs. Meanwhile, defensively, OU held their opponents to just 17 points a game in their final 7 contests. Nick Bonitto had 8.5 sacks last season, along with 32 tackles. Meanwhile, Isaiah Thomas led the defensive line with 8 total sacks himself. Tulane, on the other side, lost to the likes of Nevada, Tulsa, and Houston. I'm going to lean toward the Oklahoma Sooners -26.5 and the over 69. Next ball game, it is going to be Michigan hosting Western Michigan, 12 p.m. East. The Wolverines are -17, total 67.5. The Wolverines failed to cover in their final 5 contests of 2020. Over 41 points a game they gave up for the entire season. They're taking on a Western Michigan club who averaged 42 points a game last year themselves. Caleb Ellaby completed 65% of his passes and threw for 286 yards a game. Meanwhile, running back Ladarius Jefferson averaged 104 yards a game on the ground. When it comes to the total in this one, the Broncos went 4-2 to the over in their last 6 contests. Michigan, the Wolverines, they saw 3 out of their last 4 get over the line themselves. I like the underdog Western Michigan Broncos +17 in the over 67.5. Next ball game, not sure if it's on our big screen, but it is going to be Fresno State versus Oregon. The times are mixed up here. I've seen a few places have it listed at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've seen some other places listed at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm really not sure when they're going to play this one, but unfortunately, it's not on our big screen behind me. But anyway, Fresno State versus Oregon. I'm going to say 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Oregon Ducks are -20, number 62. I'm actually going to lean toward Fresno State +20.5 and the under 62 points. All right, next ball game. It's another one that's not on our big screen, but it is going to be Rice versus Arkansas, 2 p.m. Eastern kickoff. The Arkansas Razorbacks are -19.5, numbers 51 and a hook. Now, the Razorbacks went 7-3 against the number in their last 10 ball games. They scored 24 points or more 7 times during that span as well. Traylon Burks had 820 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns for the Hogs. He also averaged over 16 yards per reception. And when it comes to the ground game, Traylon Smith averaged nearly 5.5 yards a carry and rushed for 710 total yards on the ground. Now, they're taking on a Rice club who lost to the likes of UAB, North Texas, and Middle Tennessee State last season. The Owls averaged only 17 points per contest in their final 3 games of 2020 as well. I'm going to lean toward the Arkansas Razorbacks -19.5 and the under 51 and a hook. Next ball game, I believe it's on our big screen. It's a 3:30 p.m. start. I thought I saw it, but I guess not. But anyway, next contest, it is going to be Miami, Ohio versus Cincinnati, 3:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Cincinnati's -23, totals 51. Cincy won 9 out of their final 10 ball games last season. Only blemish was a hard-fought 3-point loss to Georgia in the bowl game. The Cincinnati offense is led by Desmond Ridder, who threw for nearly 2,300 yards, along with 19 touchdown passes. Now, Ritter was also the team's second leading rusher and punched it into the end zone 12 times on the ground. Meanwhile, defensively, the Bearcats had 21 total takeaways, including 16 big interceptions. Now, they're taking on a Miami squad who has a tendency of giving up a whole lot of points. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to lean toward the Cincinnati Bearcats, minus 23, and the over 51. Next ball game, it is going to be Indiana versus Iowa, 3:30 p.m. Eastern start time. The Iowa Hawkeyes are minus 3, totals 46. Now, the Hawkeyes won their final 6 ball games of 2020, 6-1 against the number in their last 7. Now, this absurdly stingy Hawkeye defense, they allowed just 16 points a game in their last 8 contests. Seth Benson had 45 total tackles along with a couple of sacks. Meanwhile, Jack Kerner had a trio of interceptions from the secondary, along with 45 total tackles as well. This Hawkeye defense forced 18 turnovers in just 8 total games. They're taking on an Indiana squad who's getting back quarterback Michael Penix after a really tough injury last year. Now, the Hoosiers gave up 35 points to Penn State last year and 42 to Ohio State. When it comes to the total in this one, Indy went 4-1 to the under in their last 5 ball games. Iowa saw 3 out of their last 5 outings stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Iowa Hawkeyes, minus 3, and the under 46. Next contest, West Virginia, Maryland, 3:30 East. The West Virginia Mountaineers are minus 3, totals 56.5. This Mountaineer defense played exceptional in many different ball games last season. They gave up just 20 points per contest in their last 10 ball games. And they actually held the Texas Longhorns to just 17 points and a nail-biter. Alonzo Adai had 66 total tackles along with a pair of interceptions. Meanwhile, Josh Chandler Semedo had 64 total tackles himself. Now, offensively, Letty Brown was a 1,000-yard rusher last season, along with 9 total touchdowns on the ground for West Virginia. And of course, Jared Diggy also threw for nearly 2,600 yards from that quarterback spot. Now, they're taking on a Maryland squad who lost their final 2 games of 2020, and that includes a 27-24 loss to Rutgers. To his brother, he threw just 7 touchdowns last year along with 7 interceptions, and the Terps' leading rusher graduated. Now, Maryland also struggled defensively, allowing 32 points a game. When it comes to the scoring in this one, not so sure the Terps will have enough firepower to help put this one over. They started slow last year as well. And I'll tell you this much, their final 3 ball games of 2020, they all stayed under the number as well. Meanwhile, West Virginia saw 3 out of their last 4 contests stay under the posted total themselves. I'm going to lean toward the West Virginia Mountaineers, minus 3, and the under 56 and a hook. Next ball game, a lot of eyes on this one. Alabama versus Miami, 3:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff in the Dome in Atlanta. The Alabama Crimson Tide, minus 18.5, total 61 and a hook. I don't see the Canes scoring many points in this one. Bama gave up just 12 points a game in their final 9 ball games of 2020, throwing out that Florida game. Will Anderson had 7 sacks on the year, 52 total tackles, and a forced fumble. Meanwhile, Malachi Moore had 3 interceptions from this Bama secondary. This Crimson Tide defense forced 22 turnovers, including double-digit fumble recoveries. Meanwhile, offensively, wideout John Mechie III averaged nearly 17 yards a catch, along with a total of 916 receiving yards. Now, Bama's taking on a Hurricane squad who lost their final 2 games of 2020, and they really struggled all year long defensively. The Canes allowed over 31 points a game in their final 9 ball games, throwing out the Duke contest. The Canes also failed to cover the number in 4 out of their last 6. When it comes to the number in this one, Miami saw their last 2 straight both get over the total. Meanwhile, Bama saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line themselves. I like the Alabama Crimson Tide, minus 18.5, and the over 61 and a hook. Next ball game, Marshall Navy, 3:30 p.m. East. The Marshall Thundering Herd are minus 3 on the road, numbers 47. Marshall has a great defense. Navy can't score. Give me Marshall -3, under 47. Next game, UMass Pitt, 4 p.m. East. The Pitt Panthers are -38, totals 56. I don't see the Panthers running up the score here. They also failed to cover the point spread in 7 out of their last 10 ball games. Give me the UMass Minutemen, +38, keeping this one close, and the under 56. Next contest, Central Michigan, Missouri, 4 p.m. Eastern kickoff. The Missouri Tigers are -13.5, total 60 and a hook. Mizzou scored a bunch of points in several different outings last year. They also had marquee wins over LSU, South Carolina, and Arkansas. Give me the Missouri Tigers, -13.5, and the under 60 and a hook. Next ball game, Louisiana Tech versus Mississippi State, 4 p.m. Eastern start time. The Mississippi State Bulldogs are -23.5, totals 52 and a hook. Now, in my opinion, I actually think this is a really tough number. I actually think 23.5 is just about right. The Bulldogs did cover 4 out of their last 5, and they did have several solid performances out of their offense down the home stretch. I'm going to lean toward the Mississippi State Bulldogs, -23.5, and the over 52 and a hook. Next ball game, UL Lafayette, Ragin' Cajuns. I believe this has now been truncated to Louisiana, University of Louisiana. But anyway, UL Lafayette, the Ragin' Cajuns versus the Texas Longhorns, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Texas -8, total 58. Longhorns can score a whole lot of points. 43 points a game they averaged in their last 10 contests. Josh Moore averaged over 15.5 yards per reception and 9 touchdown catches. Meanwhile, rushing-wise, Bijan Robinson averaged over 8 yards a carry, along with 703 total yards on the ground. Now they're taking on a Louisiana squad who, they did win a bunch of ball games last year, but their toughest foe was an overachieving Coastal Carolina squad. When it comes to the total, 7 out of Louisiana's last 9 ball games fell under the line. Despite some big offensive weapons for the Longhorns, I just can't see them putting up 1,000,000 points with a new starting quarterback. So I think they'll get the job done. I'm going to lean toward the Texas Longhorns -8, but the under 58 points. Next ball game, San Jose State, USC, 5 o'clock East. The USC Trojans are -14, totals 59.5. Now the Trojans should be hitting on all cylinders with Keaton Slovis back at the helm. He threw for nearly 2,000 yards in the abbreviated season, 17 total touchdown passes for the quarterback. Drake London, he caught 33 balls last year for 502 yards and 3 scores. Now the wideout, averaged over 15 yards per reception. And although San Jose State is certainly a formidable opponent, they're a pretty good team. I'm just not sure they can keep up with the Trojans offensively. Now, total-wise, 6 out of San Jose State's last 7 outings dating back to last season stayed under the number. Meanwhile, USC went 5-1 to the under in their 6 ball games in 2020 as well. I'm going to lean toward the USC Trojans -14 and the under 59.5. Next contest, Baylor, Texas State, 7 p.m. Eastern start time. Baylor Bears are -13.5, totals 55. Now, Baylor struggled last season, although they did have a few marquee covers over the likes of Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Texas. R.J. Snead caught 39 balls for 397 yards and 3 scores. Meanwhile, defensively, Christian Morgan and J.T. Woods, they each had 3 interceptions apiece from this Bears secondary. And as a matter of fact, Baylor had a dozen total interceptions last season, along with 17 total takeaways. Now, they're taking on a Texas State program who lost 8 out of their final 9 ball games of the 2020 campaign. The Bobcats allowed 40 points per contest during that 9-game stretch, and they lost to the likes of Troy and South Alabama. When it comes to the total in this one, I'm really not expecting an offensive clinic in this one. Baylor also saw 6 out of their last 9 ball games stay under the line. I'm going to lean toward the Baylor Bears, -13.5. and the under 55 points. Next ball game, another good one on paper at least. I'm talking about Texas Tech versus Houston, 7 p.m. Eastern kickoff. The Texas Tech Red Raiders are minus 1.5 away from home, total 65 flat. Texas Tech scored a bunch of points last season against the likes of Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and Texas. Henry Colombi completed 66% of his passes, and he also has wideout Eric Ezukanma, who caught 46 passes for 748 total yards. Now, the 6'3 receiver averaged nearly 16.5 yards per reception and had 6 TD grabs. Meanwhile, Sir Roderick Thompson also carried the ball 109 times for 610 yards and 8 scores on the ground. They're taking on a Houston club who lost 4 out of their final 5 ball games of 2020, and they allowed over 32 points per contest during that stretch. Now, the Cougs also scored just 18 points per contest in those 4 losses on average. When it comes to the number, I'm really not expecting a whole lot of defense in this one. The Cougs saw contests with USF, Navy, BYU, and Tulane get over the posted number last year. Meanwhile, Texas Tech saw games with Oklahoma State, Oklahoma Sooners, and West Virginia get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Texas Tech Red Raiders minus 1.5 and the over 65. Next game, Oregon State, Purdue, 7 p.m. Eastern start time. The Purdue Boilermakers are minus 7, total 66. Purdue lost their last 4 straight ball games, and they failed to cover the point spread in their last 5. This Boilermaker defense gave up 30 points a game last year. They're taking on an Oregon State club who scored 33 on Arizona State as well. And they also dropped 41 on the Oregon Ducks last year. So I'm actually going to lean toward the underdog, Oregon State Beavers, plus 7, and the over 66 points. Next ball game, Syracuse versus Ohio, 7 p.m. Eastern kickoff. The Syracuse Orange are minus 1.5, totals 55 and a hook. The Orange lost 9 out of their last 10 games. Can't play any defense. Ohio, on the other side, won a few games and scored a whole lot of points doing it. I'm going to lean toward the Ohio Bobcats, plus 1.5 in the upset, and the over 55 and a hook. Next ball game, Akron versus Auburn, 7 p.m. Eastern start time. The Auburn Tigers are minus 37, totals 55. And despite a down year for the Tigers last year, they did play some pretty good defense against the likes of Mississippi State, Tennessee, and LSU. Roger McCreary had 3 interceptions for the Tigers, 6 PBUs and 45 tackles for the cornerback. Meanwhile, Owen Popo and Colby Wooden each had 4 sacks apiece. They're taking on an Akron squad who's been pretty non-competitive in a weak MAC conference. The Zips were held to 17 points or less in 8 out of their last 10 conference games. Going to be tough to see this one get over the number. Plus, Auburn really has no reason to run up the score in this one. So with that in mind, I'm going to lean toward the Auburn Tigers minus 37 and the under 55 points. Next ball game, Florida Atlantic versus the Florida Gators, 7:30 p.m. in the Swamp. Florida Gators are minus 24, totals 52. Despite losing a slew of NFL talent to the draft, the Gators still have better horses than Florida Atlantic. They just do. Damian Pierce averaged nearly 5 yards a carry for the Gators last season, 4 scores on the ground. Meanwhile, Zach Carter led the defensive front with 5 total sacks on the year. Now, Florida Atlantic, FAU, they failed to cover the point spread in their last 4 straight. They averaged only 16 points a game, throwing out the FIU contest. I'm going to lean toward the Florida Gators minus 24 and the under 52 points. Next contest should be a good one. I am looking forward to this one. Talking about Georgia versus Clemson, 7:30 p.m. Eastern start time in Charlotte. The Clemson Tigers are minus 3, totals 51.5. Now, Trevor Lawrence is gone. Travis Etienne, he's in Jacksonville as well. Clemson, they also lost their top 2 leading receivers as well. Meanwhile, defensively, the Tigers allowed 49 points to Ohio State as well as 47 to Notre Dame. They're taking on a very physical Georgia program who finished the 2020 campaign with 4 straight wins. The Bulldogs averaged over 32 points a game in their last 10 contests. And they have both of their quarterbacks returning who combined for over 2,400 yards worth of passing. Wide receiver George Pickens, he had 36 grabs for 513 yards and 6 scores. Meanwhile, Zamir White rushed for 779 total yards and 11 touchdowns. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side of the ball, the Bulldogs held their opponents to 24 points or less in 8 out of their last 10 ball games. Adam Anderson had 6.5 sacks last year, along with a pair of forced fumbles. Meanwhile, linebacker Nakobe Dean had 71 total tackles, along with 1.5 sacks. Now, total-wise, when it comes to the number in this one, I'm really not expecting fireworks with either offense, but I am going to lean toward the underdog, Georgia Bulldogs, +3, and the under 51.5. Next contest, Northern Illinois versus Georgia Tech, 7:30 p.m. Eastern start time. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets are -18, totals 57.5. Now, the Ramblin' Wreck, they lost 7 out of their final 9 ball games. Really struggled offensively last year in a lot of those contests. Meanwhile, defensively, Georgia Tech allowed over 39 points a game in their final 9 contests. 39 points a game on average. I think the visitors should be able to keep this one close. Probably not going to win it, but they should cover. I'm going to lean toward the Northern Illinois Huskies, +18, and the over 57.5. Next matchup, Kent State versus Texas A&M, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff. The Texas A&M Aggies are -28, total 67 and a hook. The Aggies won their last 8 straight ball games, 6-2 against the number in those contests. The Aggies, they also have their 1,000-yard rusher back along with a pair of very good receivers. Meanwhile, Kent State on the other side loves to give up a ton of points in that soft MAC conference. I'm going to lean toward the Texas A&M Aggies, -28, in the over 67.5. Next ball game. Surprised there was a line for this one. Southern Miss versus South Alabama, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Southern Miss Golden Eagles are -2 on the road, numbers 56.5. Southern Miss has covered the number in their last 3 straight. Give me the Southern Miss Golden Eagles -2 and the under 56.5. Next matchup should be a good one. LSU versus UCLA, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The LSU Tigers are -4 with a total at 67 points. LSU gave up a whole bunch of points last year and had one of the worst defenses in the game. They're taking on a UCLA squad who just put up 44 on Hawaii last week, and they successfully covered the number in 5 out of their last 7 ball games dating back to last year. Zach Charbonnet had a handful of home runs this past weekend. He rushed for 106 yards and 3 scores. Meanwhile, this Bruins defense had 2 interceptions in the opener as well. Now, when it comes to the scoring this one, the Bruins opener did stay about a dozen points below the posted total. Plus, I think their defense may be able to keep LSU in check. I'm going to lean toward the UCLA Bruins +4 in the under 67. Next contest, Nevada Wolfpack, Cal Golden Bears, 10:30 p.m. Eastern start time. Cal's -4, totals 52.5. Cal lost 3 out of their 4 ball games in 2020, only played 4 times. They failed to score over 27 points in all 4 of those contests. They're taking on a Nevada opponent who won a bunch of games last season themselves, and they covered a handful of point spreads as well. Nevada went 7-2 straight up in their 9 contests, 6-3 against the number during that stretch. Carson Strong threw for nearly 2,900 yards along with 27 touchdown passes. His favorite target, Romeo Doubs, he had 58 catches for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. And as a matter of fact, Doubs averaged over 17 yards per reception. In total-wise, 3 out of Nevada's last 5 ball games got over the number. I'm going to lean toward the Nevada Wolfpack +4 and the over 52 and a hook. Next ball game, BYU versus Arizona, 10:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff in Vegas. The BYU Cougars are -12, totals 54. The Cougs pretty much destroyed everyone except for Coastal Carolina last season. They successfully covered the number in 7 out of their last 10 ball games as well. Running back Tyler Allgeier is back after rushing for over 1,100 yards, along with 13 touchdowns on the ground. As a matter of fact, Allgeier averaged nearly 8 yards per carry when he ran the ball. Now, Isaac Rex, he caught a dozen touchdown passes last season as well. That's a short yardage and red zone threat there. Meanwhile, defensively, linebacker Keenan Pili, he had 72 total tackles. They're taking on an Arizona program who hasn't won a collegiate football game in a real long time. 0-5 last year in the abbreviated season. 0-4 against the number in their final 4 games. The Wildcats finished the 2020 campaign with a 63-point loss to Arizona State. Total-wise, the Wildcats might just allow BYU to put this one over themselves. Give me BYU minus 12 and the over 54. Next game, New Mexico State, San Diego State, 10:30 p.m. East. The San Diego State Aztecs are minus 31, totals 51.5. Give me the Aztecs minus 31 and the under 51.5. Next ball game, Utah State, Washington State, 11 p.m. Eastern start time. The Washington State Cougars are minus 16.5, number 66 and a hook. The Cougs scored 28 points or more in 3 out of their 4 ball games in the short abbreviated season last year. They also upset Oregon State in the season opener by double digits. They're taking on a Utah State program who lost 5 of 6 last year and went just 1-5 against the spread in those 6 ball games. The Aggies defense gives up a lot of points and really sputters offensively. I'm going to lean toward the Washington State Cougars minus 16.5 and the under 66 and a hook. Next ball game. This is another one I'm looking forward to. I'm talking about Notre Dame versus Florida State, 7:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff Sunday night. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are minus 7, numbers 56. And if you like an inspired Seminoles ball club in the opener at home, they're plus 250 for some money line cash. And real quick, guys, following this past Sunday's sports wagering action, we're currently 10-2 in our last 12 Major League Baseball tier package picks on my brockpage.com website. And if you want to see which one of these free YouTube picks I'm actually betting on personally, there's only one way to do that, and that's to sign up for a membership on my brockpage.com website. Now, guys, the Seminoles are